Welcome all in, everybody, to a live edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. That's Thomas Dunn. And we've got a busy Saturday coming up. We will be joined by Andy Patton in just a little bit to some of the games that are coming up. But obviously, we're going to get to the full slate of games. We're going to get to what happened on Saturday. But we've got to lead off with what is the game of the week, and that is Santa Clara hosting Gonzaga in what is, I think, inarguably the biggest game for Santa Clara this century.
Yeah, it is. And, I stated it that it was the biggest. It's basically the same length of time that it's also the biggest game in the history of the Levy Center, formerly Toso Pavilion and all that. But I think it goes without saying that is a correct statement to utter. Gonzaga holding themselves at a roughly minus 3.5, 4.5 point favorite. It's ominous, in a certain sense that people think the Broncos have a chance. I do think the Broncos have a chance. I am really intrigued to see the plan on Graham Ike more than anything. I think it's easier said than done for us people to say, oh, yeah, you should let Graham Ike go for 40, stop everyone else. Oh, you throw all the bodies in the world at Graham Ike and hope he gets through it. So I'm really intrigued to see kind of what path Herb Sendek tries to go down and have the team, because they've been playing a lot better defense, I'd say, this year compared to the last few seasons. And I think it's been very noticeable in the way they've been playing with a higher sense of physicality. And while it didn't necessarily work against EK up in Spokane, I'm intrigued to see what kind of adjustments have been made and such. But yeah, like you mentioned, I think Santa Clara has been doing enough to get on the bubble now that they've made this game matter. And prime opportunity tonight, really prime opportunity to really make some noise and put your name out there for all the world to see.
I mean, we talked about it for the last really few weeks, kind of ever since that last Gonzaga game and since they've beaten St. Mary's, that Santa Clara needed to kind of just handle their business and survive until they got back to this game. And that's kind of what they've done. They escaped Washington State in a thriller up there. They played a really pesky Seattle team the other night and was able to get away with a win there. You look at the fact that they've been able to hold off Gonzaga. They remain in first place by that slimmest of margins by a half game. This is getting a lot of national attention as well, because Santa Clara is, as of right now, like almost in all the brackets, they're in the tournament right now, which is, again, it sounds shocking to say. I know, you don't want to put too much on that. At the same time, it's this is the golden opportunity. This is kind of this is why we love this sport, is these moments, because this is a team that has not been to the tournament in the last 30 years. This is a team that has been knocking on the door probably for the last 5 or so years of possibly getting in. I mean, we've talked about, they easily could have made the case that they were a case of mono away from the tournament a few years back. This is now the best opportunity for them, not only to get a potential tournament bid, but if they win this game, they now move a game and a half on both Gonzaga and St. Mary's. And now they are sitting in the driver's seat for a conference championship, let alone just a tournament bid, with only a couple of weeks to go.
Yeah, tonight, you want to talk about controlling your destiny. Tonight goes a long way in trying to establishing that narrative. And even so, still St. Mary's would have a chance to, kind of help get themselves into the ring and try and make it a 3-way tie and such, depending on what they do. But I mean, that's Santa Clara can really do a lot of good for themselves. Now, I've had people ask me, is this a must-win game? Do you need it? Gotta have it? Is it, the biggest kind of thing? And you know what my answer is? No. The answer, no. It is not a must-win game. Now, it is a must-be competitive game, that's for sure. That's for damn sure. But, you think of the way some of these teams have quote-unquote good losses. I mean, if Santa Clara, for whatever reason, were to go down by single digits, I'd be intrigued to see what the computers kind of spit out after a result like that. But I think every Broncos fan I know is that they're no, they want to win. And they feel the need to win as well. They think, okay, you want to talk about giving yourself either whether it be the margin of error or the signature win to get yourself into the March Madness at-large conversation for good. They think the buck starts and really stops here tonight when they play Gonzaga. And at least for me, I understand where they're coming from, and I definitely see why they'd be saying that, especially considering the kind of how things are adjudicated between the power six and the mid majors. So I think it's totally fair statement to say that. And for one, I think the guys are ready. I think Christian Hammond and Alan Graves are both very complimentary on a Cron Force TV interview of what this opportunity is. I do find it curious that Herb Sendek said, we don't mention the NCAA tournament because it doesn't really do the team a service. And I'm really intrigued by that perspective because you got the players acknowledging it. But the head coach is like, you know what? In our messaging, we're just full steam ahead on the game that's right in front of them. So for me, an interesting kind of diverging path in a certain sense about tonight's game. I'm intrigued to see kind of how both those philosophies play out.
I mean, it's hard not to hear the outside noise and start to think about it, because that is why you this is why you play college basketball. It's why you especially go to a place like Santa Clara in the WCC, because you want to have a shot at an NCAA tournament bid. And yeah, I mean, this is the messaging between coaching staff and players makes total sense. Like, the players, of course, are going to be thinking about it because they're watching everything, hearing everything about what's happening. You almost guarantee they're following along where they are in the brackets, where they are in all these standings. They know exactly where they are. But kind of like you've talked about it, like almost in line with what the coaching staff has talked about. It's like you can only think about the next game. You can't think about 3 games from now, 4 games from now, what all of it means. Like, no, you have to focus on the one that's right in front of you. And now maybe the biggest one is in front of them at the moment with Gonzaga coming in. Now, I will say this, like, it is not a must win, but if you don't win this, it puts immense pressure on the game in Moraga in a couple weeks, because then that game becomes it. That one is closer to a must win. I mean, Santa Clara already has their quad one. Now it is a borderline quad one because it's St. Mary's and they're right on that line. So you don't want to, you need St. Mary's to still kind of do their job and help Santa Clara out by winning all their other games. Hell, it's also like you want them to lose you want them to win every other game, including beat Gonzaga, except beating Santa Clara in a couple weeks, just to help your own case out. But I think it's like now you start to look at where we are with this matchup, specifically in this game, because this was a game that Gonzaga won, obviously, up at the Kennel. This was a ball game for the first half. This was what I think, a 2-point game at the half, and then it was in that second half that Gonzaga really just kind of really got the offense going. They shot 60% in that second half up at the Kennel, and this is I think there was at least a little bit of kind of get back for the Zags because they lost at the Kennel last year to Santa Clara. So they did have that in the back of their mind. Now, I think one of the biggest differences between that game and now is that was the last game Braden Huff played. There is no Braden Huff for this matchup this time around. And we have seen the Zags be a very different team since that injury. But we've also seen Graham Ike turn into not that he wasn't a monster before, but he has taken the reins and just thrown this team on his back the last few weeks. He's been averaging, I think it's 26 points per game in the last 4 since he's returned from his injury. And the last 2 games since that Portland loss a week and a half ago, they've won by 20 and 30 in their last 2. And that game against Washington State was an absolute clinic because the Cougars never stood a chance in that one.
Yeah, no, they Washington, and even to an extent, we've seen 2 different teams this week kind of look like a total shell of themselves and unrecognizable. And a credit to the Zags for, I don't know what it is, but Washington State, I don't know if they kind of look at the Gonzaga name on the jersey, they kind of just get spooked, but that was heinous for a lot of the stretch of the game, and credit to the Zags for doing so. And I do, like to mention what you talked about with Braden Huff. Like, that was the last time that he was out there. And the big thing about the Broncos in that first matchup is that they allowed too many bursts, and that is stretched from the end of the first half to the second half and such like that. I think between the first and second half, there was a run of 15-0. And then there was another run in there, I think, of 12-0. So I think it combined 27-0 at a certain point in that game, eventually where they ended up down like 20 points. Like that, obviously that just can't happen in this game. And I think for me, I'm interested in the deployment of the forwards for the Zags in this matchup, because I know Graham Ike, obviously not the best defender. Ismaila Diani, I do wonder if Mark Few goes back to him in this matchup, because he has success, but obviously different personnel. with the Broncos this season. And at least for me, like I always hinge that X factor being Alan Graves. He was very ready for the moment up in Spokane, played very well, and has been on a tear as of recent games, as many fan bases have found out. So for me, I am intrigued to see how Mark Few kind of deploys the forwards and who he kind of puts on Alan Graves, because I think he can be a matchup problem for a lot of guys. If you put on Grant Foster and Innocente, he can try and back him down. Jalen Morley, I think he'd be better suited on Christian Hammond potentially. So for me, I'm really intrigued to see what Mark Few kind of does in that department. Maybe it's Davis Vogel, maybe it's just him, and I think that'd be a great battle of freshmen.
Yeah. Now I do think that I think we're probably going to see a little more of Innocente on Alan Graves when he gets out there. You got to have to at least try to match the strength. And Gonzaga is a little bit kind of thin on that forward spot. And I guess it does depend on because wouldn't imagine we're going to see Alan Graves and Buke Boye out there at the same time all that often in this game. So again, it could end up being just it's Graham Ike who kind of pulls the assignment, but kind of back and forth. And now I know like Graves has been really good on the defensive end. He's been able to kind of be able to play inside and out. But he gave the last time out 34-11. So not necessarily like it's mattered against someone like him. But again, you kind of mentioned Davis Vogel. He didn't really play. Like he got into the game at the very, very end, like a few seconds there. So we have no real kind of barometer of what sort of impact Davis Vogel would have in this matchup, because this will be the first time he plays the Broncos. And Diane, he only played a minute in that last matchup, so I don't know how much we'll see of him in this one either. And the Zags have gone small for the most part over the last couple months since that injury, and I think we're going to see a bit more of that. I think we're going to see if Santa Clara is going to be able to match that, which to me kind of lends itself more to an Alan Graves night as opposed to a Buke Boye night, because of the way they're going to have to run and the way that Gonzaga is going to try to operate their offense and the way they play defense. Because now the one thing I keep thinking about in this one is like, what does Santa Clara need to do? Obviously, they need to shoot it better. They were 7 for 26 from 3. And the last time they did beat Gonzaga, which was up at the Kennel last year, they hit 18 threes. Now, I don't think they need to make 18 threes this time around to be able to win this game. I think they're a better defensive team than we've seen over the last few years. So I do think they'll be able to kind of contain that a little bit better. And the fact that they're at home, and Santa Clara has played obviously incredibly well at home. Like they're still undefeated at home, I think, at this point, right? Like 15-0 at the Levy Center.
The 13-0.
13-0 at the Levy Center. But because they've played so well at home, because they've beaten St. Mary's in that building, I think there's a lot of confidence for them in this matchup. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how Gonzaga tries to match up without Braden Huff in this lineup, what they try to do with Santa Clara, because I could absolutely see that they're just going to just continue to feed Graham Ike until he can do it no more. It's funny because we talked about maybe like limiting his minutes when he first got back, and that has absolutely not been the case. He's been kind of full bore the entire 2 weeks that he's been back on the floor. So there's been no concern about whether or not he was going to be ready physically. He was absolutely ready. In fact, almost kind of blessing in disguise, it feels like he's re-energized because he had a couple of weeks off where he didn't have to run up and down the floor. And we're going to get Andy Patton in here in just a second. Like Thomas, like just right before we get him in, like what's kind of like popping in your head as like a key thing?
For me, I think it's going to be more about the 2-point shooting and the turnover margin for the Broncos. I think that's really a big key, is with all those lanky forwards and lanky guards that the Zags have, can the Broncos avoid like those rotational, like passing lane turnovers? Can a guy like on the backside, like Innocente, who's been really good and hurt the Broncos in the first matchup, can they kind of limit his effectiveness and kind of make him, not really be a factor in the two-way scenario? And I think for me, everyone talks about 3-point shooting, rightfully so. Everyone talks about, what Christian Hammond and Elijah Mahi are going to do. But for me, it's the 2-point shooting, the turnover margin, and what the matchup looks like against Alan Graves. Because I think it's all about the X factors, I think, in this matchup. Sometimes you know what your stars are going to give you, and I think it's going to be those unsung heroes more than anything. So, and at least for me, I look at that from that lens for the Broncos, and for the Zags, 3-point shooting. I think what how dry can it get? Because we've seen it get dry at certain points. And does that where you see Davis Vogel kind of come to the rescue? Does Adam Miller have a better game as he has in somewhat recent days? So for me, that's kind of where I look at it on both sides.
The Zags forced 21 turnovers against Washington State the other night in that blowout at the Kennel. We're happy to welcome in Andy Patton from the LockedOn Zags and LockedOn College Basketball podcasts. It's the biggest day for Santa Clara, probably in, well, maybe in actually all of our lifetimes, because it feels like this is like this is such a golden opportunity for Santa Clara in this matchup. It's getting national attention. They're in almost every bracket at this point. And the Zags are coming off a couple of really dominant wins, especially like that second half against Oregon State, and then just right out the gate against the Cougs. Andy, what are you kind of looking at in this one? Because Santa Clara has been playing well. Gonzaga, obviously, after the Portland loss, has definitely been refocused. And this one, I mean, hopefully this one remains close. We've seen some lopsided matchups between these two, but Santa Clara also has wins against the Zags in each of the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's funny. Thomas kind of talked about the turnover margin, and he was talking about it more from the perspective of Santa Clara taking care of the basketball and Gonzaga's defense. But I sort of see the other side of that being really interesting in this game as well. Gonzaga's offense turns the ball over just like 14% of the time. They're top 20 in the country in terms of avoiding turnovers, and Santa Clara forces a ton of turnovers. This is something they're very good at. And so to me, in the last game, I think Gonzaga had 13 turnovers, which is not terrible for them. That's kind of a little on the high end, but I think, that was also a home game for Gonzaga. I think if Santa Clara can force some turnovers, can get in some of those passing lanes and maybe, fluster the guards. We've seen that for, especially early in the year for Mario Saint-Superi was a little bit kind of extra energized, a little extra juiced in some of those road games, and it caused him to make mistakes. I, distinctly remember the first road game for Gonzaga against Arizona State. He really struggled, and Mo Odom was able to get under his skin like he's done to hundreds of teams over the last 4 years. But that's a big storyline for me, I think, is how Gonzaga takes care of the ball and Santa Clara's ability to get some of those turnovers. But Thomas also mentioned Davis Vogel, and to me, I think he's a huge hinge in this game as an X factor, because he played like less than a minute in the last game. And obviously that was Braden Huff's last game before he got hurt. And Vogel has become a consistent part of Gonzaga's rotation, not just when both Braden and Graham were out, but now even with Graham back in the mix. And his development from the beginning of the year till now has been truly astonishing, as particularly on the defensive end of the floor. He was a good isolation scorer right out of the gate, which is something you don't see very often. But then he's started to get better at using his length and being able to get steals and get blocks and get out in transition and make the right plays. And he's still somebody who struggles a little bit in terms of perimeter defense, and that's obviously a big factor against Santa Clara. I know that Coach Few was working with him a lot on not pinching in on drives and giving up outside shots, particularly in the San Francisco game and against Santa Clara last year. That was Gonzaga's big issue on the perimeter. So if Vogel can have a good game defensively, can not leave his marks, can contest shots on the perimeter, and do some damage offensively against a team that really hasn't seen him much this year, I think that could be a big factor in this game.
Yeah, Davis Vogel kind of flies under the radar here, because you mentioned the opportunity that's at stake for him. Zach and I mentioned that the prior game between the Zags and the Broncos, that was the last time Braden Huff was suited up. So like, there's a lot of what happened then kind of doesn't necessarily apply now. And we talk about how the defense is, for the most part, is taking shape in a better form and function for Gonzaga. One of those interesting matchups is Allen Graves, because I'm not necessarily sure, and not really in a bad lens either, but I'm just not sure who Mark Few's going to go with initially on Allen Graves. I know you've been breaking it down. Zach mentioned Emmanuel Inocente. I was like, talked about Jalen Morley and Davis Vogel a little bit. I think Morley may be better served elsewhere on some of the guards. How do you kind of foresee some of your initial thoughts on this matchup with Allen Graves and against some of the Zags lankier guys, albeit a little bit smaller guys?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because that was about the only thing in my first answer that I didn't talk about that I wanted to, is Allen Graves. I think he's a huge factor in this game. I mean, he's been so good the last 10 games for Santa Clara. He was really good against Gonzaga last time out, and his size, his ability to score from the perimeter, I mean, he's a problem. I don't think it'll be Innocente. Mark Few really likes putting him on the opposing team's primary like initiator, so I think he'll probably get the task on Christian Hammond for the most part. I think that it probably will be Worley. I don't love that because I think it takes Worley away from other opportunities, but Worley is who guarded Paulus Morauskas, and obviously Morauskas and Graves are not the same type of player, but I don't think it'll be Graham. I think you have to keep Graham on Aboye and whatever other bigs are in the floor, and you just don't want Graham defending away from the rim. It's not really his strength, and frankly, they could probably bait him into some fouls, which would be very problematic for Gonzaga if that were to happen. So I think it'll be Worley. I think at times it'll be Tyon, although again, Tyon's a very good perimeter defender. He blocks a lot of threes out there. I don't think he's going to block a lot of 6'9" Allen Graves' threes necessarily, but he's going to contest pretty well out there. But again, that takes him away from the rebounding, that takes Worley away from the rebounding. And that's what makes Graves so challenging is he can play away from the rim. He can pull your defenders out. He's also big enough to get down and kind of bang around on the block. So this is a big matchup issue for Gonzaga. It was last time, and that was even with Braden Huff, who is admittedly not a great defender, but at least another big player on the floor. So I expect to see it mostly be Worley. I think he's going to probably not have a particularly big impact in this game offensively because he's going to be working really hard on the defensive end of the floor. Gonzaga can certainly get away with without having Worley offensively if they lock down on defense, particularly on Graves and, of course, Hammond and Mahi as well.
One of the things that we noticed, especially in terms of this matchup a year ago and really changing the course of the tide, is Mila Diani. And since Huff has gone down, Diani's minutes has been up and down. Obviously, he still gets into some foul trouble pretty quickly, in some of these games. Do you think Few goes back to the well again to see what Diani is like in this matchup? Or do you feel like it's more of a Zags would rather go small and not try, risk trying to get a second year in a row of the Diani adjustment at the Levy Center?
Yeah, I think the Zags, I've been waiting to figure out what Gonzaga is going to do in the non-Graham EK minutes since EK has returned from his ankle injury. And we haven't really figured it out because, as Zach alluded to earlier, Graham's played basically like 35 minutes plus in all of those games. They really haven't gone back to the small ball lineup, which is what they ran in those 3 games, obviously, where both Graham and Braden were out with Worley playing the 5. And Diani played, 20-ish minutes in 2 of those games, but I think against San Francisco, he only played like 6 or 7 minutes, and they just went small pretty much that entire game. I haven't seen him go back to that, and I don't think he will against a Santa Clara team that has some size and some length and is a good rebounding team. So I do think that any non-Graham EK minutes will probably go to Diani. He hasn't really developed as much as I think a lot of people hoped that he would. He's still really young. He's basically the age of a freshman as a sophomore, and the foul issues have just been so prevalent for him this year that he hasn't really been able to stay on the floor. His best game ever is still very much that game against Santa Clara last year. He hasn't really been able to replicate that success this year. He's a great screen setter. He's a great rim protector. I think he has value to this team and could certainly be an impact player in this game, especially again with the size that Santa Clara has. But I think he's sort of fallen out of the trust of Mark Few and the Zags right now. And again, I wish I knew what they were going to do, because the first time Graham Ike gets in foul trouble, they're going to have a solution there. And I think it's probably going to be a mix of that small ball lineup. The nice thing about the small ball lineup is they often play other teams' bigs off the floor. This is what happened against San Francisco. The reason that Diani only played 8 minutes in that game is because San Francisco benched David Fuchs, and Gonzaga basically said, we would rather have no Diani if you're not going to have David Fuchs. And they could try to do that in this game, but again, it's not going to work on Graves. It maybe works on Bucky, but I don't know if that's valuable enough for Gonzaga. So I think you're going to probably see a pretty hefty dose of Graham for as many minutes as they can get him on the floor. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's as close to this entire game, provided he doesn't get in foul trouble.
I mean, that's almost just the chicken or the egg thing, or just like the biggest problem that any defense has trying to game plan for the Zags is, what the hell do you do with Graham Ike? Because if you try to double or triple, like as we've seen some teams do, it doesn't seem to matter. If you let him go on his own, it doesn't seem to matter. He's been, I think it's 26 points per game since he's returned in the St. Mary's game. He had the 30 points against the Gales. He had 35 against Oregon State last week. I mean, it seems that just like we know he's kind of taken more of the leadership role since Braden's gone down. We know that he's kind of taken upon himself to really kind of throw this team on his back. I mean, if you're trying to game plan against this team, how would you almost, if you're especially specifically Santa Clara, how do you kind of make sure that is it limiting his touches? You just let Graham go crazy and stop everybody else. It feels like a number of teams have tried different things and nothing is slowing him down right now.
This is not a statement I ever thought I would say out loud with respect to my friends at this school, but you kind of got to watch the Portland tape. Like, I mean, honestly, they and Gonzaga's made adjustments since then, but what UP was able, I mean, they were really good offensively in that game. That was the main thing. I mean, Gonzaga scored 82 points in that game. It's not like their defense was great, but Graham, they kind of prevented Graham from getting the ball as much as they could. They pinched in, they dared Gonzaga to shoot from the perimeter. Gonzaga took 17 threes in the first half of that game. There are many, many games this year where they have not taken 17 threes at all. And that was either a bad game plan or a bad execution by Gonzaga. I'm not really sure what they were doing, settling for outside shots against a team that doesn't have even near the size of a Santa Clara. Since then, Graham has basically said, okay, I don't care if they're doubling me. I don't care if, the read I typically make is kicking the ball out. I'm just going to go to work. And I think that's what he's going to do in this game. But Santa Clara is one of the few teams that has the size where they don't have to double him. They can attempt to play him straight up. It may not work. Graham may be able to get Aboye in foul trouble and then be able to score more effectively against the rest of the front court. Certainly, they don't want to risk Graves getting in foul trouble. A lot of teams will double on the first dribble. That's what Portland was doing when he did get the ball, and it kind of forces him to take a dribble and then immediately kick it out. From there, Gonzaga, again, if they're settling for threes, you probably feel pretty confident. If Santa Clara gets beat by Gonzaga because Gonzaga shoots well from three, I think you kind of tip your hat because that's not something they've done very well this year, at least not consistently. I think if you just let Graham go to work and he beats you, it's kind of like, well, yeah, that was predictable. Like that's what Oregon State was kind of like, well, we're going to try to stop him, but we'll see what he can do. And then he just killed them. I mean, just absolutely dominated in that game. Washington State was kind of not competitive from the jump, but I think Santa Clara is going to probably try to prevent Graham from getting the ball as much as they can and try to get the ball out of his hands. But I think he's just going to try to score through contact as much as possible and score through those double teams as much as possible. And Gonzaga is going to send Tyon or Worley or whoever to try to crash the offensive glass because they're probably going to be open when Graham's shooting because there's going to be 2 to 3 hands directly in his face. And that has worked effectively for Gonzaga. If, again, a guy like Fogel can kind of create his own shot a little bit on some of those broken plays where Gonzaga can't get the ball to Graham or he can't get a good look, so he kicks it out. You give the ball to Fogel, you let him just take a couple dribbles and throw up a mid-range jumper. That has worked for Gonzaga as well. And so I think they're going to try a couple of different things there, but ultimately I think Graham's going to hold on to the dang basketball as much as he possibly can in this game. And I think that's probably what the coaching staff wants him to do.
Probably just a little bit of a successful thing to do. If you think of what the Zags have been, throwing into Graham Ike is kind of not a problem. We talked about Davis Fogel, and at least for me, my impression is that this is probably going to be the first prime road environment for Davis Fogel in terms of high leverage minutes. And I am intrigued to kind of see what happens along that front from a personal stake. I think the youth from both sides, I think, is like an extended X factor. We mentioned Graves, we mentioned Fogel. I think Sash Skavalugov, that's a guy who. I talk about it on the show all the time. Like it's my highest variance player for Santa Clara. How much in his grill are the Zags going to be? We'll kind of see along that front. Kind of who else are some of those X factors that you kind of look at, whether it be from the Gonzaga perspective or the Santa Clara perspective? You're like, you know what? They can tip the game, and not even from the sense of they're going to drop 30, but they're going to do some things on the margins that are like that may drive you crazy by the time the final box score comes out.
Well, since we're sticking with youth, I guess I'll mention Mario again. We kind of talked about him a little bit already, but he's the best three-point shooter on this Gonzaga team in terms of percentage. His volume is certainly not as high as an Adam Miller or a Steele Venters, but he's so important to this team in terms of pace and pushing the tempo and getting Gonzaga into their offense. Braden Smith has been very good too. Braden Smith's a really good passer, and again, also has a really good tempo to him in the way that he plays. Mario is a better shooter. I think he's a better defender, mostly because he's a little bit bigger and able to keep guys in front of him. And now that Mario has kind of adjusted to college basketball officiating, he's not getting in foul trouble as much as he was at the beginning of the year. I think his ability to space the floor is going to be incredibly critical in this game. And then I would mention a couple other guys. I mean, for Santa Clara, even, I know he's not really an X factor. He's one of their best players, but Elijah Mahi did not have a very good game against Gonzaga last time out, and that was a lot to do with Emmanuel Nicente and Jalen Worley and those wing defenders. But I think Mahi's a guy who he's very good at getting to his spots. He's very good at getting downhill and hitting those little floaters or getting all the way to the rim. I think he's going to play better than he did last time in Spokane, and I think that that's going to be a challenge for Gonzaga defensively. And again, I think that that's where somebody like Tyon or Worley or Innocente become a significant factor for the Zags. So there's a lot of different players here, but I think offensively Mario's really important. Defensively, Innocente is of course important, and how effective Elijah Mahi is for this team compared to last time, I think will be a factor as well.
One last one to get you out of here. I mean, thinking about in the big picture of obviously after the Portland loss, it kind of knocked the Zags down a couple of seed lines. How important is this game for the Zags as far as the resume goes? Because obviously they don't have a ton of more opportunities to get quad one opportunities, and this is one. They do still have the game at St. Mary's as well, and probably likely either one or two more of these matchups again in Vegas. What sort of performance can actually kind of help the Zags case to kind of climb back up that seed line? Or do you feel like kind of like they might be sort of stuck, not necessarily stuck, but movement seems a little bit harder at this stage?
This is very interesting that there's this kind of nervousness or anxiety or stress around the performance of this Gonzaga team when they are 24-2. Like, I cannot remember a season where they had two losses on Valentine's Day and we didn't feel like super great about the team. But obviously the Huff injury is a factor. The fact that one of those losses was to the Portland Pilots, a quad 3 loss, the fact that the other loss was by 40, and then some of their wins, it took overtime against Seattle U. It took Barry Wong barely missing a 3 against San Francisco. Like, they've had some scares certainly this year. And so I think for Gonzaga, the net ranking is still great. The KenPom ranking is still great. The computers will continue to love them regardless of how this game goes, unless they get blown out, which is not going to happen. I think this game matters certainly in the sense of another quad 1 win never hurts, and this is clearly going to remain a quad 1 win. But it's more of like, Gonzaga hasn't finished below second in the WCC in 30 years, and they don't want that to happen. And a loss here puts Santa Clara very much in the driver's seat for finishing first or at least second, which is incredible for them. That's why this game matters so much for the Broncos. But it also puts Gonzaga in a tie with St. Mary's and puts them in a position where that game in Moraga becomes a lot more important for Gonzaga. And then, they got that road game against San Francisco, not exactly going to be an easy one either, even if the Dons got obliterated by Oregon State in one of the more shocking results of the week. I think this game matters for Gonzaga more for pride of their final year in the WCC than anything else. From a metrics perspective, again, a close loss versus a win is not going to change that all that much. I think Gonzaga is pretty squarely on the 4 seed line right now. I think a 3 seed is possible if they win out. I think a 2 seed is very unlikely at this point. I think a 5 seed is the more likely scenario if they lose this game. So the difference between a 4 and a 5 is fairly minimal. They'll probably still get a seed. They'll still get a spot in Portland, most likely, if that happens. So I don't think it's a huge needle mover in that way, but it definitely impacts their pride as a member of the WCC and puts a lot more pressure on that game in Moraga, whereas a win here sets them up more comfortably to at least be finish second, where they get that triple bye in the WCC tournament.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Andy, for hopping on and previewing this matchup. A big one down at the Levy Center tonight. Zags taking on the Santa Clara, 7:30 tonight on ESPN. So thanks a lot, Andy. We will definitely be catching up. We have St. Mary's Gonzaga in just a couple of weeks, so we'll catch up then.
Thanks, guys.
All right. I mean, it's a big one. Like, there's no way kind of around what this matchup is going to be. All eyes are going to be on this matchup tonight, because if Santa Clara can pull this one out, and I think there's a very good chance of them doing it, it's going to puts them in the driver's seat for not only to kind of secure a spot for March, but also the 1 seed and a conference championship, because again, there'll be a game and a half up on both St. Mary's and Gonzaga with a win tonight. And I know Thomas, like, it's going to be kind of nervous time probably for you all day long, waiting for this one and as the continuation of this game goes. But this one is going to be a fist fight all night long. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's going to be insanely physical. It's going to be a treat for everyone at home. And, you mentioned 7:30 start on big ESPN. Like, this ain't no ESPN2, ESPNU, like big ESPN, albeit this game probably starts on ESPN News, considering Auburn, Arkansas is the lead-in for this game, and SEC games run embarrassingly long. So prepare for that, guys, to find your dial for ESPN News to start this game, inevitably. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a rocking atmosphere. It's going to be sold out. I was there yesterday doing some work, and I saw them setting up the student section barricades already. So that's going to be at least 3 full sections of bleachers. So really excited to see. And Levy, for as much grief as I give it sometimes for how it was built, I mean, when it's popping, like it can get loud in there, and Mark Few can very much attest to that. So I'm sure you see what the environment's like, who sets the tone, and do the Broncos break out the Nash throwback jerseys again and try and inflict some more pain on the Zags like the last time with the Adama Alpha ball? We'll see. But I'm going to be there. It's going to be tense. It's going to be fun. I'm really, really, really excited to see how both these teams shake out, because it's going to be a really good chess match.
But it is not the only big one today. We do have the 3rd and 4th place teams facing off over in Stockton later tonight, as well as St. Mary's will be heading to take on Pacific. And these 2 teams, I mean, we obviously have talked a lot about St. Mary's and just to continue the job they did. They blew out Pepperdine the other night, 88-60. Not the best. It's funny. It's like they won by 28, and it wasn't actually kind of the best performances from St. Mary's. It was definitely, they turned the ball over a little too much. They didn't quite have the performances out of some guys you would expect. They didn't shoot it as well as you thought. And then Pepperdine hung around for at least 8 minutes in that game before it started to separate there in the first half. But Pacific, they continue to handle their business. They continue to actually pick up wins. Again, like they had LMU the other night, and that one was a tricky one. Like LMU was up in that game for a long, long time, and the Tigers were able to kind of bear down, claw their way back into it, and pick up a win with a strong second half. Dave Smart has this team playing well right now. They are solidly in 4th place. They are a game up on Oregon State for that last spot in the quarterfinals. I mean, I don't necessarily think that Pacific is kind of ready for that primetime sort of St. Mary's game, but they are going to keep this close. They're going to keep this interesting because they have just found ways to stick around in a lot of these close games.
Yeah, and we talked about what it's like to see Pacific kind of get on the rise. They so far have avoided the cannibalism that is the standings right below them, and now this is the tough stretch of play. And I think the biggest thing to acknowledge is that we talked about how when you play some of these teams like one time, like how funky it is to kind of prepare and get things. Like, this is a late time in the year to only play some team once, and for St. Mary's and Pacific both, like that can be a funky scout, and like it can be something where your adjustments, like you really have to like navigate the waters well in terms of what you're willing to adjust for and how you end up adjusting. And for me, that's kind of like the biggest plot. Who sets the tone and who blinks first kind of in that department of adjusting, whether it be Randy Bennett or Dave Smart. And then how about the other thing we haven't brought up yet? Like, this is a national TV game in Stockton, like in the Big 2026. And I think that's a massive credit to one. Obviously, this game gets picked before the season starts. So, there has to be some forecasting by ESPN that Pacific will be a lot better. But the Tigers, at the same token, have to hold up their end of the bargain in making it worthwhile. And I believe they have. And I think that deserves massive credit for doing so, because we know what Pacific was a couple years ago. They were lost in the Central Valley, nowhere to be found. And right now they are relevant. And I think that's a notable step to make and take. If you're Pacific, and if you're especially like a Tigers fan, like, people are talking about you for all the right reasons. And that is something that, compared to some other programs, that's a lot more than you can ask for with other fan bases. So for me, I look at that. And then when we get into the basketball portion of it, for me, everyone knows what Elias Ralph does. Everyone knows that St. Mary's is going to try and take Elias Ralph. So my key is TJ Wainwright. What does TJ Wainwright kind of give in terms, because he's a guy who I think can really force Randy Bennett into a pickle, especially with all the attention shifted over to Elias Ralph. I think the rotations and rallying to the rotating to shooters is going to be big for St. Mary's, obviously something they've been really accustomed to doing. And I know he doesn't get the shine necessarily that he deserves. Maybe he does. I know he does amongst Gales fans, but I think going from a bigger picture lens, I mean, I will watch Dylan Shaw play basketball all day, and I will not get tired of it. That is a winning basketball player through and through. And, even on the somewhat limited volume, I mean, he's efficient. I mean, in conference play, he's been one of the most underrated players, period. And I'm really intrigued to see how Randy Bennett deploys him. I think he can be an X factor on both. He's going to be an X factor defensively, but I think on offense too, the more they can get him involved in the spot up game, I think all the better.
I mean, you bring up Dylan Shaw. He's going to be a huge part defensively in this one, because I could see him getting shifts on both Elias Ralph and on TJ Wainwright. I could see him kind of switching back and forth and being an effective defender on either one of them. Now, for TJ Wainwright, like, that's going to be a fun matchup, because it's largely going to be probably he and Josh Dent. And Josh Dent has been a huge factor this year. Obviously, like, was one of the bigger surprises for St. Mary's coming into the year, but he's continued to just play well all throughout conference play. I mean, he's averaging 13 points a game. He's shooting over 50% from the field in WCC play, 43% from three. He has been one of the big bright spots this season for St. Mary's. And this is going to be a different type of matchup against TJ Wainwright, because this is someone who's going to take it to the basket a little bit more. Wainwright has that really good step back that he can take from three. I think he's going to test Josh Dent in maybe a different way than we've seen some other guys. Almost kind of like the Steph Curry treatment of, you have to really like chase TJ Wainwright around all night long to be able to slow him down. So I look at that matchup. I think about Elias Ralph and what he's been able to do. He had 22 points the other night against LMU. He played 39 minutes in that contest. So he's kind of ready to go. But I'm also kind of thinking about the rebounding in this game. Pacific has rebounded it really well this year. They were plus 11 the other night against LMU, and St. Mary's has not been quite the rebounding team that we have seen over the last few years. However, they did obviously do really well against Pepperdine in that department. I think that's going to be a big key in this one, is who is going to be able to take care of the glass and own the paint. Pacific's done a really good job of that, because they're not the greatest three-point shooting team. So they do attack the basket. They do get a lot of their points in the paint, in that mid-range. So if Pacific can control that and really kind of own that area, they're going to hold their own. They're going to have a shot to steal one against St. Mary's. But I just feel like St. Mary's is just so experienced. They know kind of what they have to do in these moments, that Paulus Morauskas will have I expect a big night from him. I think we'll have a big night from Josh Dent. I think Dylan Shaw could be that X factor. But we could also see one where I don't know how you match up with a Andrew McKeever in this one. I know Isaac Jack has had his moments, but the tandem of Wessels and McKeever are going to be just a huge, literally huge factor in this game, because they're so hard to game plan for, especially again to the point you haven't seen this team yet, and you really can't replicate trying to go up against 2 7-footers.
Yeah, and I think, at least for me, so you talk about the rebounding, Pacific, I think what stands out about them is the gang rebounding. Everybody's crashing. And St. Mary's, it's kind of the same too, while acknowledging that the centers get the bulk of it. It's not like guards are cheating out to leak out or something like that. I mean, guards of the past are also getting in the mud trying to rebound. I've seen Marshallonis in there. I've seen Tommy Kuzi in there. I've seen a lot of Gales of backcourt players get in the mud when it comes to that. So for me, I think the gang rebounding is going to stand above all as one of those keys to the game within the rebounding scope. You mentioned what it's going to take in terms of the big problems of McKeever and Wessels. I think Pacific we've seen the road offense drop a little bit for the Gales at times, but I think the thing that stands out is that these are more back to the basket post players for Pacific than anything. They have more forwards that they can dispose from the perimeter, but in terms of the center, Isaac Jack is not going to be bombing threes away, pulling Wessels, pulling McKeever out of the paint. So for me, I think that benefits the Gales big men to a degree. And you talk about consistency. I think this next month it's got to be Harry Wessels. You got to give me continuous consistency, I think, more than anything. Because yes, McKeever's been doing great, but coming off the bench and that sort of like volume, so to speak, no matter the circumstances of how he gets in there, it's a lot to ask to continue to kind of not necessarily be a savior, but do what the center position is supposed to do in the Randy Bennett system, for lack of a better phrase. So for me, I look at Harry Wessels as like, let's go. Like, this is one where these guys are gonna be banging bodies with each other, and the expectation should be for him to come out with the win in terms of that matchup.
Wessels with 11 rebounds, 5 points, 3 assists in that game against Pepperdine the other night. So we're going to switch gears and start to get into the other games that we have the rest of the weekend, because we have 3 that are happening on Saturday and then 2 more on Sunday. But before we get specifically into that, we're going to talk about how what USF did the other night in honoring Bill Russell, because they hosted the Bill Russell Impact Classic, which would have been on Bill Russell's 92nd birthday. As part of the game, a portion of the proceeds for the game are going to the Bill Russell Emergency Relief Fund for USF students and the Bill Russell Six Foundation. But they also dedicated a main thoroughfare on the USF campus and renamed it the Bill Russell Way. So cementing his legacy on the campus for future generations. They also honored his widow, Janine Russell, during the game, and also presenting a posthumous honorary doctorate for Bill at halftime of that one. Just want to throw that out and just honor one of the basketball greats and what USF did to celebrate him over the weekend.
Yeah, that was so cool to see. And I think sometimes when you talk about legends, like, it's especially when they're posthumous like this, you don't necessarily, schools are a little bit hesitant to kind of say, yeah, let's roll out the red carpet and such. And, I'm not trying to equate that 1-to-1, but I think it's cool to see that USF acknowledges, yeah, like, Bill Russell is, and will forever be that guy and have that type of impact on the USF campus, both on and off the court, because that's exactly what he did. It's what he did for the Bay Area. It's what he did over in Boston for an extended time. So I think for me, I look at all that and I say, you know what, that's good on USF for continuing to go back and keep the Russell family in the loop more than anything, because it's not just, okay, cool, we're going to acknowledge you with a graphic or like a digital footprint or anything like that. No, it's like, we're going to actually involve you back around this campus. And, despite the fact that USF is still searching for a permanent athletic director, like, that's a good step in the right direction of maintaining a relationship and getting things going on the right foot. And so when we go, or at least when I go, when the Santa Clara plays at USF next week, like, I'm going to go look at the Bill Russell Way. I think it's going to just be kind of cool to kind of see something, kind of have it sink in a little bit more. I don't know if the next time you're going to be able to get to the hilltop, but I think it's just one of those things that you kind of pick up in your mind. And you're like, you know what, that's kind of cool, because not a lot of campuses have like a legend that they can turn to and say, you know what, like, they were here and actually making a physical impact even long before I was walking these roads.
Exactly. And his legacy will live on in basketball circles, American circles, forever. He transcended the sport. He transcended what it meant to be a professional athlete and a civil rights leader in the U.S. But now we'll switch back to on the court, where it was not so rosy for the Dons, because the Oregon State went in to this one and absolutely steamrolled USF in the game on Wednesday night. I mean, this was about as bad as I think I've seen USF play in, I don't remember how long. It's like, it has been a long time since I think I've seen USF play this poorly. And also, get massive credit to Oregon State, because they came in with a game plan and executed from the get-go. Oregon State deserves a ton of credit for what they were able to do. And they are a team now sitting at 7-7 in league play, one game behind that 4 spot. They're starting to kind of like, they're playing a little bit better. 3rd road win for this team in conference play, 3rd straight road win for Wayne Tinkle's squad. I don't think we can understate just how well they've been playing away from Gill Coliseum in this one. It kind of got it from all over the court. But this just feels like it was a story of 2 teams heading in completely opposite directions.
Yeah. And you know how I kept joking about Wayne Tinkle road wins in this economy. All right, Oregon State, I like the fact that they're still doing it. And like you mentioned, I mean, they put the whooping on USF. And you mentioned, I had people text me saying, like, I remember seeing this at the end of the Rex Walters era. And I can't say that I sat there, 1-to-1 watching that basketball, but I'll tell you this, that was a unrecognizable team. And I say that not from the perspective of this specific season, but the bulk of the last few seasons, really post pandemic. Like, this is a unrecognizable USF team. They at no point showed a winning fight or a winning effort, and I left stunned because that was like the first time you can't quit if you never showed up, and USF never showed up in that game one time, and I never expected that. I think that was really the most surprising thing is, USF, they'll fight hard and then they, sometimes they won't come out on top. But really, this is an extended call from when they played St. Mary's on the road recently. I don't know what I'm looking at right now. I mean, USF, we expected so much of them. And okay, cool. The basketball is one thing, but like, throw out the score. I mean, you got to fight for 40 plus minutes. And at no point did I ever feel USF. And I genuinely did not recognize this team, and this was a really concerning performance. I think almost to the level of what Washington State showed over in Gonzaga earlier in the week. Like, those are two teams that they look like ghosts out there, and I don't know how USF responds. I know the people talk about get right games and stuff like that. San Diego's playing better, so San Diego, in its current form, even without Tyler Johnson, they can put a scare into the Dons, if not beating them. And it's not like it gets easier for USF after that game when they play Gonzaga in Santa Clara the following week. But yeah, for me, like, that's what stood out above all in that Oregon State game. They were unrecognizable, and a credit to the Bees for putting it on them on a consistent basis. 20-point lead at the break. I mean, that the Bees deserved to win, took it to them, and did so going away.
I want to quote Eric Haslam, who posted this about the Dons' just performance, Haslam metrics. The Dons had already recorded 2 of their worst 4 performances of the season in the pair of games immediately before the contest against Oregon State. But things got even worse for San Francisco last night as the Dons logged a season worst game efficiency rating of negative 59.25. San Francisco fell 26 spots to 132. The Dons are 363rd in the country in our momentum metric and have dropped 3 straight, 5 of their last 6, and have performed below their season norm on defense in 7 of their last 8 games. To your point, this team has been unrecognizable the last few weeks, and I don't know where the solution is, how you get right in this environment, because you take on San Diego, and this is a San Diego team of like, oh yeah, the news of Tyler Johnson, their leading scorer, is no longer with the team. That was announced by Steve Lavin in postgame after their win against Portland. So by transitive property, San Diego has now beaten Gonzaga, and naturally. And I mean, they almost did actually beat Gonzaga down at the Slim Jim. But the San Diego team, I think, is not going to be an easy out. Like, this is a scrappy team. This is a team that has some talent. And even without Tyler Johnson, they're starting to figure it out. We've seen some really good performance from Adrian McIntyre. We've seen some really good performances from Tenari Lane. This is not a San Diego team you can sleep on right now, because like, they are slowly kind of creeping up, and they're only 1 game behind USF right now in the standing. So really, this is a dangerous game for San Francisco in a time where they really, really need a good performance.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about diverging paths. I think you talk about that with Oregon State USF. I think San Diego USF is kind of to a somewhat similar degree. I mean, the Toreros, even without Tyler Johnson, who, I've seen opposing fan bases from his prior stops chime in about what his sweepstakes is like, and that it's not too terribly surprising. But San Diego still beat Portland, and yes, the Pilots have been kind of a rough road team, but still, like, you have to go out and handle your business. And I think San Diego, at least in recent stretches, they've kind of flown under the radar, at least from our perspective. And we were about ready to write them off earlier in the year, and then here they are. Now they're in that fight, with everybody else. So when it comes to them, LMU, Portland, USF, Washington State are starting to get dragged back into it. I mean, we still got a long way to go when it comes to that battle. So really intrigued to see how that kind of plays out. And we talked about LMU earlier in their efforts against Pacific. I mean, they did that all without Jalen Shelley, and we don't really have a read on what's going to happen without him going forward. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. But I mean, so much roster movement all over the place, including with Washington State, with some fellow news along that front with Emmanuel Ugbo.
Yeah, so this is serious news. This is no
Yes.
joke. We're going to let the court start to handle the business here. So, spokesman review, Greg Woods reporting, Emmanuel Ugbo is facing stalking allegations, which was the reason he was initially suspended just a while ago. So, tweet from Greg Woods. WSU forward Emmanuel Ugbo has been accused of stalking and harassment by a Cougar volleyball player, according to court records. Ugbo has been suspended since late January, shortly after the woman was granted a protection of order against him. The judge will decide whether a grant a full protection order next Wednesday. When reached on Thursday, this past Thursday, Washington State spokesperson said the program would not be commenting on the ongoing issue. So we will let the legal proceedings kind of take their course. Obviously, not a good look for the program, and then on the court, this is a big impact because this was one of the guys that they really kind of leaned on. And we've had seen some up and down performances from Ugbo going into the last few months anyway. But Washington State coming off the ugly loss to Gonzaga the other night really does feel like they need to get right. Luckily, they do get the weekend off to kind of lick their wounds and think through what next week is going to look like. But Washington State, and David Riley talked about it afterward. This was he liked the energy, but nothing else was working.
No, it wasn't. Gonzaga had almost as many paint points. They had 50 as Washington State had total points in 53. And going back to the Ugbo thing, yeah, you mentioned what Greg said, and he even posted an update saying, it was actually the Murrow College News students who initially went and scoured for the news. So a massive credit, support student journalism. I mean, nobody had any idea what happened to Ugbo for these first couple games and of his suspension. And so a massive credit to those students at Murrow College for diving in and, finding those court records and stuff, and eventually Greg amplifying it to where we can find out and talk about it, because it is serious. And that's something where, yes, there's immaturity at play, but now it's bordered, it's gone past that. And now it's like, okay, we actually have to, take stock and be very delicate with how we talk about these things. So yes, like you mentioned, let the legal proceedings go out as they may. But when it comes to on-court things, I mean, there are a lot of teams right now that they could use a break, and Washington State can be one of the few that actually gets it. So that game against Gonzaga was ugly. So and I don't really have a whole lot to add out there. It's over in like the first 5 minutes of the game, and there's still a lot more to play for, especially with other teams regarding those fights. We talked about Oregon State earlier. I mean, they're at Seattle U Sunday. That's a very pivotal game. Redhawks, I thought they played well at the Levy Center, but they just didn't win. And LMU playing their PCH Cup rival in Pepperdine. I know the Waves would love nothing more than to get some get back over on the Lions.
I think I want to focus on that Oregon State Seattle U game, because I mean, we talked a lot throughout the course of the season of trying to find an identity for this Oregon State team, and for a while it seemed a bit lost. As of late, I mean, I think their personality is it's their scrappiness. Like, that is who this Oregon State team is, because it feels like from one game to the next, they're just finding ways to win. And they have done it in different ways. They've done it where they've had big scoring nights from Josiah Lake. They've had nights where they just kind of drag teams into the mud and are able to pull out wins. Now, yeah, they've had some blowout losses. Like, they've obviously got smoked by Gonzaga last week. They have that massive loss at home to Pacific, but as of late, they're figuring it out. This kind of the win against USF the other night is kind of a testament to that and how they've been playing. The fact that they went to Washington State and got a win there, another kind of testament to what Oregon State has been able to do. They're going to be dangerous, I think, as we get deeper and deeper in the conference play. Now, going up to Seattle U, I think, is going to be a separate challenge. Matchup wise, I mean, defensively, we know what Seattle U is going to bring, but I don't know. These Road Warrior Beavers now may actually have something going.
Maybe they will, and we relent to the fact that Oregon State kind of back when Seattle U was at one of their higher peaks, they came crashing down at Gill Coliseum. So Oregon State already proven that they can beat the Redhawks, and maybe the Red Hawks turn a corner offensively after what happened on Wednesday at the Levy Center. I mean, Braden Maldonado was flat out ridiculous in that second half, and I think the offense looked as good as it had really all season in terms of its flow for the Red Hawks. And, go back to your home court. You'd like to think you can go get some more of that against Oregon State, but, we'll see. Big slate of games over these next couple days.
Might actually see a good crowd. Actually, it's not too bad of a drive to go from Corvallis up to Seattle. It might make for a good weekend up in the rainy city, the Emerald City.
I'll get behind that.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Twitch, wherever you are watching and listening. That's Thomas. I'm Zach. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.